Let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer. Let it be. When you're in times of trouble, Mother Mary speaks to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. All right, welcome into the live, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. This is Trev from Trevessence, and today it is Easter Sunday, and we are going to continue reading the book on this foundation. We are hoping to finish this book within the next week or so. We're just about halfway there. So I want to finish this book maybe I'm going to give it about a week. For those of you who have been following as we have read this book, we are reading this book alongside the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and we are going to read the book of Haggai as well, because this book, which was set in Persia, also depicts the story of Nehemiah that we have read about in the Bible. And so we're reading both of them together so that we can get additional context. And since I have I have a little bit of time right now. I just took a break out of my garden. And so I have a little bit of time before the time comes up for me to do something else. So I'm going to be reading this book on this foundation. We are now at chapter 26. So if you are new here, a very special welcome to you. Thank you so much for coming. And to all my returning travelers, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Jojo, how are you doing, my love? Good to see you as always. I am on to chapter 26. Let's begin. Nehemiah stood in the temple courtyard for the morning sacrifice. His prayers were the same as he had prayed since arriving in Jerusalem, for the Almighty One's help in quickly rebuilding the wall, for his wisdom in making the right decisions, and for his aid against their enemy. The temperature had fallen during the night, and the morning air felt cooler than it had in several weeks as a refreshing mountain breeze blew up from the great sea. He thanked the Almighty One that the long heat wave had finally broken. The work would proceed more quickly in cooler weather. After whispering amen and opening his eyes, Nehemiah immediately scanned the area all around him. His training had taught him to constantly assess his surroundings, to be aware of every detail, and quickly discern anything that looked different or out of place. It was second nature to him now, but this morning, when he gazed around at the worshipping men, something was amiss. Nehemiah couldn't put his finger on it, but the atmosphere seemed different. He sensed a charge in the air, as if a thunderstorm approached, even though the sky was cloudless blue. Get what's up? How you doing, sugar? Good to see you. Happy Easter Sunday to you, my love. So good to see you, my darling. I hope you're having a great Easter Sunday. Eat up your bun and cheese and all those good things. Let's continue. The laborers gathered in the courtyard this morning looked reckless, their attention distracted from the priestly ritual. Groups of men stood whispering together, their faces sullen and angry. None of them seemed focused on the temple service or on the priest who was about to pronounce the blessing to close the morning service. Was it Nehemiah's imagination, or was the man watching him? He casually turned his head to look behind him and noticed something else that was different. Usually, only a handful of women and children attended the morning sacrifice, but today they filled the outer courtyard. Hundreds of them. He leaned close to his brother Anani and whispered, "Something's going on." Any idea what it is? What do you mean? His brother's senses weren't as well honed as Nehemiah's. Look around, Anani. The sacrifice is over, yet no one is leaving. And there are more people here than usual. Certainly more women and children. I don't think I'm imagining that they are watching me. Anani gazed around and drew a quick breath. You are right. But what should we do? Stay calm. For the first time since his escort of Persian soldiers returned to Susa, Nehemiah wished they hadn't. His brothers had worked behind the scenes to gather swords and spears and other weapons ever since the day Sanballat and the other provincial leaders left Israel, and they had unearthed a storehouse full of arms left over from the battles of the 13th of Adar, nearly 13 years ago. Many of the weapons needed to be repaired, and all of them needed to be sharpened or the bows restrung. Nehemiah had commissioned every local blacksmith he could find to work on them and make them functional again. Planning to arm his laymen workers in the event of an enemy threat, now, seeing the restless mob that had gathered in the courtyard, he was glad that he hadn't. He whispered a silent prayer, then turned to his brother. Let's go. Start walking towards the stairs. Maybe the unrest he had sensed was all in his mind, but as he started to leave, the mass of men, women, and children moved into the center of the courtyard, blocking his way. We would like a word with you, Governor Nehemiah. The spokesman had the sturdy build of a laborer, the tanned face and calloused hands of a man familiar with hard work. Certainly. What is it? He kept his tone friendly and courteous, careful to show no fear or resistance. We have a grievance, Governor, and even though every one of us has worked willingly to help rebuild the wall, we refuse to work another day until you listen to us and help us. This was bribery, extortion. Nehemiah shouldn't surrender to this tactic. He should require them to go through the proper channels and present their petition without resorting to threats. But he also knew that if he refused to listen now, he might lose several valuable working days. Nehemiah needed all of these men on his side, even if their methods infuriated him. What's your grievance? He folded his arms across his chest, determined to show no emotion. The hand of the Lord my God is upon me. We need your help to correct a great injustice to our province. Before the man could finish, the courtyard erupted with everyone shouting at once, desperate to be heard. We are losing our homes, our livelihood. We want our children back. And our land. We need food. We are starving. Women wept as they held up raggedy, undernourished children for him to see. But Nehemiah found it hard to follow the thread of their protest in the thunder of so many angry voices. He looked at his brother, then back at the crowd, and all he could do was hold up his hands for silence. Tempers and emotions were so high that he whispered a prayer for Anani's safety, afraid the crowd would trample him if it surged forward. I'm willing to listen, he shouted, but you must speak one at a time. If this turns into a riot, then nothing will be accomplished. Even though Nehemiah pleaded for order, it took several minutes for the clamoring protest to die down. At last, the angry buzz of voices quieted. Let one man speak for all of you. There was another mumble of conversation before the man who had first spoken stepped forward again. The drought has been severe. We and our sons and daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and stay alive, we must get grain. Again, everyone began shouting at once. As Nehemiah waited, a second man stepped forward. We are landowners, working to support our families on property that belonged to our ancestors before the exile. But we are forced to mortgage our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine. On top of that, the speaker added, we had to borrow money to pay the tax the king imposed on our fields and vineyards. During another loud protest against the king and his heavy taxation, Hanani leaned close to whisper to Nehemiah. Our delegation to Susa learned that the Persian king collects 20 million darics every year in taxes. None of it ever benefits the provinces. When the mob finally calmed down, Nehemiah asked the men, who have you borrowed from? Who holds the mortgage on your land? He expected to hear that it was Persian government officials like Sanballat and Tobiah. The people's answer shocked him. Those of you who have been here in the reading, you all know why it shocked him, right? I hope you all remember, because who is the person who have been going around and collecting all this money and taking the children if he doesn't get the money and taking away the animals? It has been Malchijah. And Malchijah is ruler of one half of Jerusalem, and Shalom is ruler of the other half, and Nehemiah is the governor. So listen, I'm excited to read it to see what Nehemiah does when he hears that it is Malchijah. The people's answer shocked him. Hey Sammy, how you doing? Our own brethren, the wealthy few who have grown rich on our fortune, on our misfortune, the rich nobles on your own counsel. Is this true? Nehemiah whispered to his brother as he waited for the shouting to stop. I don't know, Hanani said with a shrug. Although we are of the same flesh and blood as our countrymen, the man continued, and though our children are as good as theirs, we have to subject our sons and daughters to slavery to the man who holds our mortgages. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, the other speaker continued, but we are powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. This can't be happening, Nehemiah said, not because he doubted the protesters, but because he didn't want to believe that his fellow Jews would subject their own people to slavery. Ask them, a man shouted. Ask men like Malchijah ben Rechab, how many of our children he has enslaved. At least in Babylon our families could stay together, a weeping woman shouted. Nehemiah couldn't reply. The people's outcry and the charges that had brought before him infuriated him. He saw desperation in the eyes of the people in front of him and remembered the lavish meal he had eaten at Malchijah's home in Jerusalem. He had little doubt that what the protesters said was true. I am very angry to learn about these abuses, he said when he finally could be heard. I had no idea this was happening. Anyone who is starving may come to my residence this afternoon, and I'll give you and your family food. I'll order my servants to open my storehouses to you. From now on, you'll be under my protection. My table will be your table. That's just for today, someone shouted. What about freeing our sons and daughters from slavery? Give me time to find a solution. I'll meet with you again when I have answers for you. We are not working on your wall until you do something. Again, the outcry was so great that Nehemiah knew the crowd wouldn't be able to hear him, even if he did try to plead with them to reconsider. He motioned to Hanani to follow him, then waded into the mob to return home. Nehemiah liked to keep a safe corridor of space around him at all times, and as he was forced to pass through the crush and press of the mob, he felt close to panic. Ever since the night he and his brothers crowded behind a piece of furniture to save their lives, Nehemiah hated tight spaces. By the time he reached the bottom of the temple steps, he was breathing hard and drenched with sweat, but grateful to have open space around him again. This is exactly what our enemies have been hoping for, Hanani. They want the work to halt. They want our people to be so deeply divided that they can no longer work together. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Listen, I need you to to open my storehouses like I just promised to do. In the meantime, if there is a solution to this problem, it has to be in the Torah. I'm going to talk to Rebbe Ezra and see if he has any advice. I know the Almighty One commands us to help the poor. But when he reached Ezra's house, he was distressed to learn that the rabbi hadn't returned from the morning sacrifice yet. Had there been a riot after he had left? Had Ezra, the former governor, been caught up in it? Nehemiah waited, pacing in place, until Ezra finally arrived home. "Sorry," the rabbi said. "I decided to wait on the Temple Mount until the crowd dispersed. So, you heard what happened this morning?" "Yes, I heard. And is what they are saying true? Are the wealthy landowners really taking advantage of the famine to become even richer? Are they forcing their brethren to mortgage their land and enslave their children in order to put food on their tables?" "I don't doubt that it's true. The drought has been very severe." Nehemiah had to draw a deep breath and exhale slowly to remain calm. "And what does the Torah have to say about it?" "That's what I came to ask you, Rabbi. I want to demand that these outrageous practices stop immediately, but I need the law to back me up." "Sit down, please," Ezra said. "I could use a seat myself." Nehemiah obeyed, but he perched at the very edge of the chair, waiting for Ezra's reply. "Concerning any impoverished men and women who don't own land and are without food," the Rebbe began, "the Torah says we are not to be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them, but open-handed. We are to give generously and do so without a grudging heart. God says there will always be poor in the land. Therefore, he commands us to be merciful towards our needy brethren." "So it's a command," Nehemiah said. "Yes. Now, as for the men who do own land, the Torah allows for their property to be mortgaged in times of need. But at the end of 7 years, the debt must be cancelled, even if it hadn't been repaid. Yes, the Torah says that the man who made the loan shall not require payment from his fellow Israelite. He must cancel any debt his brother owes him, but only after 7 years. That's a long time. Can we force these wealthy men to give back the people's land before then? I'm afraid not. We can only appeal to them to show mercy. As for those who have been forced by circumstances to borrow money at exorbitant rates and sell their children into slavery, the Torah clearly says, do not charge your brother interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. Any man who is currently exacting usury from his fellow Jews is breaking the law. I'll make sure that practice stops immediately. As for the sons and daughters of the poor who are being enslaved, the Torah forbids our people to hold a fellow Jew as a slave. I doubt that this has occurred, but the law does allow us to sell our children or ourselves as bond servants if we become poor. Only for 6 years, mind you. In the 7th year, they must go free. Now, you all see, gentle people, when we say that in the Bible does talk about slavery, how white people use the Bible to justify slavery. Here, the rabbi consulted with the Torah, which is their holy book, about whether or not it was right for Malchijah to be mortgaging the people's lands and taking it back if they can't pay him, and taking the children as collateral. Now that Nehemiah has consulted with Ezra, the rabbi, he is getting an insight into what is going on in the city. Clearly, he was unaware that Jewish children were being held as slaves. And there Ezra is telling him that the Torah clearly states that as a Jew, you cannot keep a Jewish child as a servant, as a slave. But I bet it will tell them that they can keep another child that's not a Jewish child. The Bible was used by colonialists to forward their agenda of slavery, transmitting people across the transatlantic just to come and work for them to make them rich. They wouldn't enslave their own white people, but they enslaved the black race. Just a thought there, my friends. And also, I've said before that everything, all the laws that we have today, or the majority of the laws, are based on laws from the Bible. Have you ever heard that after 7 years, any debt you have, it comes off of your credit? Has anybody here ever heard that? I have heard that a million times. That after 7 years, the debt is no longer on your credit. Now, do you see where they got that 7 years from? Because here he's telling, Rabbi Ezra is telling Nehemiah that in the Torah, it says that whatever your brethren owes you, you have to forgive it after 6 years. After 7 years of them owing it to you, you have to forfeit the loan. You can no longer collect the debt after 7 years. All right, let us continue. 6 years, yes. And when they finally are set free, they are not to be sent away empty-handed. Supply them liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. The Torah says, give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you. So no one is breaking the law if these children remain bond servants for the next 6 years. That's true. But I believe our compassionate God wants us to show compassion to one another. Yes, I do too. That's exactly why I intend to tell all those men who are prospering during this famine and taking advantage of the poor that this has to stop. I would also remind them, Ezra said, stroking his white beard, that the exile was caused by abuses such as these: injustice, the oppression of the weak by the strong, the failing to obey the Torah. I'll do that. Nehemiah stood eager to begin. Thank you for your help, Rabbi. I plan to call a meeting as quickly as I can arrange it and hold the guilty men accountable for these abuses. Will you stand with me and back up what I'm saying with God's law? Certainly. You'll be in my prayers, Nehemiah, as always. Chapter 27. Jerusalem. Nava stood in the rear of the temple courtyard with all the other women, waiting in the place where she had promised to meet Dan. She had been terrified for him when he walked up to the front of the mob to stand with the other men and confront Governor Nehemiah. Now he was safe. The governor had listened to their pleas. Nava stood on her tippy toes, trying to see above everyone's head, watching for Dan. She finally spotted him pushing past the others to hurry back to her, and she laughed out loud with relief and joy. Dan, that was amazing! You were wonderful! She grabbed his hands and squeezed them tightly, her heart aching for the day when they could finally hug each other at moments like this. His tanned face beamed with happiness. Did you hear what the governor said, Nava? He's angry about what rich nobles are doing, and he is going to find a solution. I really hope he helps us. Me too. Maybe this nightmare will finally end. Maybe you can come home and we can get married. I'm almost afraid to hope that anything will change. Wealthy men like Malchijah probably won't give up easily, but we'll all agree not to go back to work on the wall until we get relief. The governor will have to help us if he wants his wall finished. I'm late, Dan. I have to get back to the house. Walk with me. They hurried towards the stairs, still holding hands so they wouldn't become separated. The crowd moved slowly as they filed out, the men not in a rush since they weren't going back to work. Nava and Dan threaded their way around them. Malchijah and most of the other rich noblemen were probably here at the temple today, Dan said when they reached the bottom of the steps. If they heard what the governor said, they'd probably conspire together, scrambling to find a way to keep all their money and servants. I'll try to hear what my master says when I serve his meals, Nava said. And I have more good news to tell you since I saw you last. The other night, my master became engaged to that nice woman named Chana who defended you the night you came to the estate. She's very kind, so when I go back to Beth Hakerem, I know I can ask her for help if Master, Nava stopped, horrified. She had nearly blurted out the truth about Master Aaron. If what? Dan asked. If Master Malchijah is unkind. Dan pulled her to a stop in the middle of the street. That wasn't what you were going to say, was it? Please, I'm already late. I need to hurry. Nava never ever lied. And she had never lied to Dan. Tell me the truth. What are you hiding? Nothing. It was the truth because nothing had happened with Master Aaron yet. Dan held her shoulders and made her look at him. We promised that we will always tell each other the truth, remember? She nodded. She also remembered that Dan had threatened to kill Malchijah and his sons if they ever laid a hand on her. He would do it too. She had to ease her fears. Listen, ever since you told me that my master and his sons had a right to marry me, I've been terrified that it would happen and that I would never be able to marry you. Even the thought of it makes me crazy. Well, my master's fiancée is very understanding. I told her that I loved you, and I believe she would help protect me from a forced marriage. My master listens to her. He listened the night you broke in, remember? That's all I was going to say. Then why did you stop in the middle of your sentence? Nava thought quickly. Because I didn't want to remind you about my master's sons. I don't want you to worry. Please, Dan, I really need to get back to work. I haven't been set free yet, you know. She smiled, knowing he couldn't resist her smile, knowing he wanted her to be happy. When they were a dozen yards from Malchijah's house, she stopped again. You had better not come any closer in case someone sees you. I'll meet with you again tomorrow. She turned and sprinted the rest of the way to the rear door of her master's house. The housekeeper's forehead was creased with anger as she met Nava at the door. Where have you been? She was older than the housekeeper on the estate and hadn't approved of Ruth sending a servant as young and inexperienced as Nava to work in the master's Jerusalem house. Nava tried extra hard to please her, fearing she would send her back to Beth Hakerem if she made a single mistake. Not only would Nava be unable to see Dan every day, but she would have to cope with Aaron's advances again. I was about to send out a search party, the woman said. I figured you had run away. I would never run away, Nava said. I was late because there was a protest in the temple today, and the crowds were so huge that they blocked my way. I had a hard time getting through. But I'm so sorry. What kind of protest? Nava hesitated, unsure how much to say. The housekeeper was a hired servant, not a bond servant. Her job of caring for this house and feeding all the laborers would be impossible if Malchijah set all his bond servants free. Some of the area farmers asked the governor for help because of the drought. They said they are not going back to work on the wall until he does something about the famine. Nava picked up a broom as she talked, starting her usual morning chores of sweeping floors and cleaning the kitchen and washing the breakfast dishes. Maybe if she busied herself and worked hard, the housekeeper would forgive her for being late and not ask too many questions. Nava didn't want her to know that she had taken part in the protest or that she was secretly meeting Dan. I'll just gather the dishes from the dining room now. Just a minute. Nava's heart beat faster, fearing she was in trouble. Yes, ma'am. You say the men aren't working on the wall today. That's what they told the governor, ma'am. So you don't have to prepare a midday meal for them. I don't know. Would Dan and all the other men have to go without food? Had they thought of that when they had decided not to work? They never remembered that the governor had promised to open his storehouses. Well, don't just stand there. Get to work, the housekeeper barked. Nava jumped to obey. But she was aware from snatches of overhead conversations that a servant had been sent to the dung gate to speak with Malchijah, and that her master confirmed that work on the wall and at his gate had come to a halt. He had ordered not to feed any of his men until they returned. Nava longed to tell her fellow bond servants about the protest at the temple, especially her friend Rachel. None of them had seen how angry the governor had been to hear about their plight or how he had promised to help them. But as the day progressed, nothing changed except their workload. With no midday meal to prepare, most of the extra servants, like Nava, stood around with nothing to do. She and the others had come to Jerusalem in the first place to cook for the workers. Would she be sent back to Beth Akarem now that the work had stopped? Back to Master Aaron? The hope that Nava had felt this morning began draining away like water in sand. Chapter 28. Going to his field headquarters would be pointless for Nehemiah. Silence had settled over Jerusalem, replacing the constant background noise of shouts and grunts, sawing and chipping and chiseling. The laborers had carried through with their threat, bringing work on the wall to a standstill. Frustrated on several levels, Nehemiah returned to the governor's residence after his meeting with Rebbe Ezra and gathered his brothers and his 3 aides together in his private chambers. I've been pondering the people's accusations, he told them, and after talking over the matter with Rabbi Ezra from a legal standpoint, I've decided on a course of action. The wealthy men who are taking advantage of their fellow Jews during the famine need to be confronted. How long do you think it would take to summon all the nobles and officials and district leaders here for a meeting? Not long, Ephraim said. Most of them are already in Jerusalem to supervise one of the sections of the wall or one of the gates. Good. Send out messengers right away, he told his aides. Tell them I'm calling for a meeting tomorrow morning at the temple immediately after the sacrifice. Do you think that's wise, Governor? Johanan asked. The wealthiest men are all on your council. Why not meet with them privately in your chambers? If the protesters overhear you at the temple, I want to be overheard. What I have to say should be said in public. The poor people need to know that I'm not hiding anything or working in secret. But to accuse Judah's nobles and officials of wrongdoing and shame them in public those who are doing wrong and violating the Torah should be ashamed. And those who have nothing to hide will be able to withstand public scrutiny. Nehemiah waited to see if anyone else had a comment, then sent his 3 aides away to relay his message. Anani, were our storehouses open to the poor today? He asked his brother. Are they getting enough grain to feed their families? Everything proceeded very smoothly. The people are grateful. You're a very cunning politician, Nehemiah, Ephraim said. By giving to the poor, you have earned their undying loyalty and gratitude. Now you all see why politicians always come feed people during election? You all see where they get it from? The licky people them, their belly? Yeah, man. These people are really are really suffering because there is a famine. But like in these modern days when politicians come around and give you 2 pound of flour and two pound of chicken back to get your vote, and after that you know see them again in a year, gunfire them. And then when there are important legislations to be passed, then pass it without you in mind. They put their signature beside it without you in mind. Until when? Until when election come again. When election time come again, that time they remember you again. And it not just happen in poor countries, it happen here too. Let us continue. Nehemiah wanted to be angry with his brother for politicizing his motives, but his words had an element of truth. Nehemiah had wanted to please the masses so they would return to work on the wall. I'm feeding them because the Torah commands me to, he replied with a sigh. I hope the people's loyalty and gratitude go to God, not to me. Aren't you afraid that if you alienate the nobles and council members, they'll turn against you? Anani asked. Johanan might have a point about shaming them in public. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm here to rebuild the wall, Nehemiah said. Although deep in his heart, he knew he also wanted to be admired and applauded by the people he served, the noblemen as well as the commoners. As for shaming the nobles, the reason I'm holding the meeting in the temple is so the Almighty One will have a chance to speak to them. As they stand in front of his sanctuary, they may be reminded that God sees their secret deeds and knows their motives. And what if things don't go the way you hope they will? Ephraim asked. What if a riot breaks out? Poor against rich, tempers are already near the breaking point. If our people are that deeply divided and the class hatred is that strong, then there's no hope at all for our survival as a people. Rebuilding the wall or anything else we try to do will be a waste of time. Nehemiah didn't sleep well that night. He walked up to the temple early in the next morning without waiting for his brothers and chose a place to stand alongside Rabbi Ezra as he worshipped. I've called for a meeting with the leaders and nobles after the sacrifice to deal with the problems we talked about yesterday, he told him. Will you say a few words to the men too? Of course. I've been looking into the matter more carefully since we talked. More people than usual crowded into the temple courtyard for the morning sacrifice, and Nehemiah was pleased to see his council members there, along with the nobles and district leaders. As the incense ascended to heaven, he prayed that the men would listen to him, that their hearts would be moved with compassion, and that the Almighty One would heal the divisions among his people. Nehemiah took his place in the outer courtyard when the service ended. In the same place he had stood to announce his intention to rebuild the wall. He motioned to Rabbi Ezra to join him and waited for his officials to assemble in the front of them. He wasted no time in making his accusations. You are exacting usury from your own countrymen. As far as possible, we have brought back our Jewish brothers who were sold to the Gentiles. Now you are selling your brothers only for them to be sold back to us? His voice echoed off the temple walls as a shocked stillness settled over the courtyard. The men in front of him stood quietly, as if finding nothing to say. What you're doing isn't right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? My brothers and I are giving the people grain to help them during this famine. You also should be giving charity. The Torah commands it, and it forbids the exacting of usury. It has to stop. He nodded to Ezra, letting the older man speak next. I want to read you the word of warning that the Almighty One spoke to our ancestors before the exile, Ezra said, unrolling a small scroll. He spoke through his prophet Ezekiel, saying, You are a land that has had no rain or showers in the days of wrath. There is a conspiracy of his princes within her like a roaring lion tearing its prey. They devour people, take treasures and precious things, and make many widows. The people of the land practice extortion and commit robbery. They oppress the poor and needy. I looked for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it, but I found none. So I will pour out my wrath on them and consume them with my fiery anger, bringing down on their own heads all that they have done, declares the sovereign Lord. The silence in the crowd was absolute. Ezra took his time rolling up the scroll, then faced the nobles standing in front of him. We all know what happened to our fathers when they failed to heed the Almighty One's warning, when they continued to oppress the poor and needy. Will we now follow in their footsteps and do the same? Ezra stepped back, gesturing to Nehemiah to continue. If you care about our nation and about our covenant with God, he said, I challenge you to give back the people their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses immediately, and also the usury you are charging them, the 100th part of the money, grain, new wine, and oil. As Rabbi Ezra just reminded us, the destruction of Jerusalem and our exile were caused by our ancestors' refusal to live according to the Holy One's law. It was only God's undeserved grace and mercy that made it possible for us to return to our land. Will we now take advantage of that grace? God asks you to show mercy to the poor because He is merciful. Our ancestors owed Him their love and loyalty, their tithes and their gratitude. Instead, they worshipped idols and forgot His covenant, amassing a huge debt of sin. The Almighty One didn't have to forgive that debt. He could have let us remain in exile, but He did forgive us, and here we are. If He can forgive our mountain of debt, can't we also forgive our brothers' debts? Nehemiah paused to let his words settle over the silent people. Those of you who God raised up as leaders, you are supposed to be shepherds of His people. If they are suffering, it's your job to help them. Instead, you weren't even concerned enough about them to make this city safe. What kind of shepherds are you? You should help your brothers who are in need instead of charging them interest and forcing them to mortgage their land and sell their children as bond servants. I'm aware that the long drought led to this situation, but the Torah says the Almighty One will bless us with rain if we live right. Maybe He allowed this drought to show us the greed that's in our hearts, to change us into His servants, to give us an opportunity to have mercy. And we are failing the test. Please, I urge you to show compassion to those who are poor and starving and give them food, free of charge, as my brothers and I are doing. If men have borrowed money from you, stop charging interest and give them back the usury you have illegally charged, or you will be held accountable for breaking the law. If they have mortgaged their land to you and sold their sons and daughters as bondservants, I beg you to give back their land and their sons and daughters. You may be within the bounds of the law in taking them, but I appeal to you to show mercy as God has shown us mercy. A spontaneous cheer went up from the poor people at the rear of the assembly. But even before the sound had died down, the district leader from Tekoa stepped forward to confront Nehemiah. We have a legal right to expect payment for the loans we made, and we have a right to keep any mortgage land and bond servants for 6 years. I know you do, but I'm asking you to show mercy and give up those rights. Why? I worked hard for what I have, and I manage my property well. Why should I bail out people who couldn't manage theirs? Should we all become poor together? That's nonsense. Why are you siding with the poor, Governor Nehemiah? Another councilman asked, and treating us like animals when we are acting lawfully. Their anger and lack of compassion didn't really surprise Nehemiah, but it saddened him. I care about the rich as much as I do about the poor, he told them. As your governor, I could impose a tax on all of you for my support, but I'm not going to do that. Neither I nor my brothers have demanded the food allotment that Governor Sanballat required before I came. I know what a heavy burden he placed on the people, taking 40 shekels of silver from each of you in addition to a tax on your food and wine. His assistants lorded it over the people, but out of reverence for God, I didn't act like that. I never demanded the food allotted to me because I knew what a heavy load it placed on you. How can I live in luxury when there are people in this province who are in need? I have devoted myself to the work on the wall instead of acquiring land and servants and planting crops. Listen, if you won't give up your rights to repayment and help your brothers for the Almighty One's sake, then at least do it to avoid the scorn of the nations. The Gentiles know how our God set us free from slavery in Egypt. Is he now too weak to set his people free from slavery to their own brethren? And one more thing, if we free our brothers out of kindness and compassion, maybe one day the Holy One will free us from servitude to the Persians. Most of the men standing in front of Nehemiah seemed chastened. It was time to ask them to act on what they had heard. Do you agree to do what I'm asking? He challenged. Will you find it in your hearts to show compassion? We will give everything back, one of the leaders said, and we will not demand anything from any of them. Another added, we will do as you say. The cheer that followed their promises was deafening, but just to make sure that these men wouldn't go back on their word, Nehemiah summoned the priest standing off to one side. Have all those nobles and officials taken oath before God to do what they just promised? He told them. Guys, you see where the oath comes from when a politician gets sworn into office? That's where that oath comes from. It was being done back then, where when you were appointed as the governor, you had to take an oath. When you said you were going to do something, you had to take an oath, rest your hand on the Bible, and swear that whatever you say you were going to do, you're going to do it. Then he got the crowd's attention again and made a dramatic show of shaking out the folds of his robe. In this way, he shouted, may God shake out of his house and possessions every man who does not keep his promise. So may such a man be shaken out and emptied. At this, the whole assembly shouted, Amen, and they praised the Lord in a loud voice. Nehemiah stepped down from the platform as the priest took his place to administer the oath. Let's get back to work on the wall, he told his brothers. They headed towards the central staircase leading down to the city. And once again, hundreds of people crowded around Nehemiah to thank him, some reaching out to touch him or his robe. He fought to quell this rising panic as they closed in, knowing they meant him no harm. At last, he reached the city street below, and he could breathe again. He thought of the prophecy that Rabbi Ezra had read about God's condemnation of the leaders who hadn't sought justice for their people. That prophecy had been fulfilled in his ancestors' time. The leaders and kings contributing to their nation's destruction and exile. But Nehemiah was satisfied that this morning he had restored a measure of justice and righted a wrong. Remember me with favor, O my God, he silently prayed, for all I have done for these people. That is the end of chapter 28. My friends, we are going to read another chapter. As I told you, I have only just about an hour. So we are going to read another chapter in Jerusalem. Navas stood in the tightly packed crowd at the temple, secretly holding Dan's hand as they listened to Nehemiah deliver his speech. Give back their land and their sons and daughters, the governor said. Dan joined the great cheer that erupted all around them, but Nava couldn't utter a word, her throat tight with emotion. When the noise died away, she held her breath, waiting to hear how the rich men would respond. If only God would answer her prayers. Are they going to do it? She whispered to Dan. Her hand ached from the strength of his grip. Maybe, I don't know. Listen, we will give everything back, one of the leaders said, and we will not demand anything more from them, another added. We will do as you say. The cheer that followed their promises was deafening. Nehemiah, neither Nava nor Dan could resist the urge to hug each other with joyful abandon. Abba would Abba would get his land and vineyard back. Nava would go free. She would be with Dan for the rest of her life and never have to worry about Master Aaron again. It's too wonderful to believe, she said as she clung to the man she loved. When the governor made the men take an oath before God so they wouldn't go back on their word, Nava longed to watch Master Malchijah take the vow. But she was too far away to see who came forward to stand before the priest. As Governor Nehemiah plowed through the crowd to leave the Temple Mount, she and Dan rushed forward to thank him like so many others were doing. He had renewed her hope and given her a future. I need to return to work, she told Dan after the governor was gone. Why bother? You are going to be set free now. You can go home to your family. Maybe, but I'm not free yet. And now that the men will be returning to work on the wall, I need to help prepare food for them. The governor did his part. Now we all need to do ours. She and Dan made their way through the joyful chaos as poor families like theirs cheered and wept and celebrated the good news. The men who had left their farms to rebuild the wall hurried to their work sites. Are you going back to help with the wall too? She asked Dan. Yes, but I want to go home first and tell our families the good news. Just think, our fathers' farms and crops will belong to them again. Their loans will be cancelled. And best of all, you will be coming home. Is it safe to walk there all alone? I'll be fine in the daylight hours. Believe me, I'm so happy I could run all the way home and back again. I'll see you tomorrow then, she said as they neared Malchijah's house. He gave her hand a loving squeeze and she ran the rest of the way to the courtyard door. Nava couldn't disguise her joy as she hurried into the kitchen. You are late again, the housekeeper said. Where were you all this time? And why are you grinning like you just found gold? I have wonderful news. I went to the temple for the sacrifice, and Governor Nehemiah held a meeting afterwards. She looked around at the other servants, aware that everyone except the housekeeper was a bondservant like her. He appealed to all the rich landowners to show mercy to families like ours who have become poor because of the drought. He asked them to cancel our debts and set all their bondservants free. Nava's friend Rachel covered her mouth as she gave a little cry. If it was true, she could go home to her husband and children. Nava saw the tangled mixture of hope and fear in everyone's eyes as they stared at her. She understood their reluctance to believe her. All the wealthy men agreed to do it, she told them. I heard them. Governor Nehemiah made them come forward and take an oath before the priest, promising to give everything back to us. She could barely stand still, wanting to jump up and down with joy. Did Master Malchijah take the oath too? Rachel asked. It is really going to give us some freedom. I don't know for certain. It was too crowded to see, but surely he did. All the other leaders swore to do it. In the meantime, we have work to do, the housekeeper said, clapping her hands. I assume this means that the work on the wall will continue. I think so. I saw a lot of men hurrying to their work sites. In that case, we have a meal to prepare for a lot of hungry workers, so get busy. Nava did her chores in the days of joy, imagining all that awaited her in the next few days. She could return home and hug her mother and father and brothers for the first time in more than 2 months. She could work alongside them on Abba's land, knowing that it all belonged to him again. With their debts cancelled, maybe she and Dan could be married at last. They would announce their betrothal, and Dan would begin digging the foundation for the home they would share. Nava and the others finished preparing the midday meal, and a team of servants left to carry it to the workers at the dung gate. Master Malchijah was expecting dinner guests that evening, so Nava and the others had another huge meal to prepare that afternoon. But she took a moment to hug Rachel tightly when they were alone in the storage room. "We are going to be free. Can you believe it?" Nava whispered. "No, I'm afraid to believe it. I want to hear it from Master Malchijah's own mouth." When the master returned from his work at the dung gate late that afternoon, he went straight to his chambers to wash and change his clothes before his guests arrived. The servants watched his every move, holding their breath, waiting for the announcement that he would cancel their debts and set them free. But Malchijah never said a word about it. Nava strained to overhear snatches of conversation as she served the evening meal, but the only thing the men talked about was the progress of the wall. She and the other servants were reluctant to go to bed, waiting for the announcement of their freedom. When Malchijah's last guest departed, he retired to his bedchamber. "Surely he hasn't forgotten, has he?" Rachel asked as they cleared the dinner table. "He must know we are all eager to hear him say it. Maybe he is going to make a grand announcement tomorrow," Nava said. But Malchijah left the house early the next morning without eating breakfast. Nava and the other servants gathered in the kitchen to talk to the housekeeper. "Did your master say anything at all about giving us our freedom?" one of them asked. The housekeeper shook her head. Not a word. Nava must have been mistaken about what she heard at the temple. "Now eat your breakfast and get to work. We have a lot of work to do today." Instead of eating, Nava hurried up to the temple for the morning sacrifice. She found Dan waiting for her in his usual place, his eyes filled with hope. "Are you ready to go, Nava? I told your family that I would bring you home today, and they were overjoyed to hear the news. They can hardly wait to see you." And he stopped when he saw her tears. "Nava, what's wrong?" "I'm not free yet. Master Malchijah never said anything about it when he came home last night, and he left again this morning without saying anything." "I don't understand. The men took an oath before God." "I don't understand either. It was hard enough to have our dreams snatched away the first time, but if it happens again..." She didn't finish. Dan steered her out of the courtyard and down the stairs, neither of them in the mood to worship the Almighty One. "Let's just go home to our families," Dan said. "Come on, what can Malchijah do to us?" Nava longed to go, imagining herself at home again with the people she loved, but she knew she couldn't. "I can't leave yet, Dan. I promised Abba that I would work as a bond servant to help repay his debt, and I can't disappoint him. Besides, Malchijah could take away Abba's land if I don't work for him. That was the deal they made. I need to work until the debt is officially cancelled and am set free. Then let's find him, either here at the temple or where he works at the dung gate. Let's demand to know why you aren't free." Dan's short temper fueled his impatience. He wanted to take action and do something, and his pent-up energy would be dangerous until his anger cooled. "Dan, we can't confront my master. Our fathers are the ones who need to talk to him, not us." "Nava, no! We need to. We need to stay calm and wait to see what happens. Malchijah is a very powerful man. Please, Dan." He gazed into the distance towards home, and Nava saw him fighting for control, as if trying to calm a whirlwind. "Fine. I won't confront him. I'll get my father and yours and all the other men who are in debt to him, and we'll confront him together." Do you know if he's going back to Beth Hakerem soon, or should we talk to him here? He usually goes home for the Sabbath. If he doesn't set you free by then, we'll demand to know why not. For the rest of the week, Nava and her fellow bondservants hung in suspense, waiting for their freedom. But nothing happened. Malkijah traveled home to Beth Hakerem for Sabbath, and the day of rest seemed a month long as Nava waited for Dan to return from confronting him. When she finally saw Dan climbing the temple stairs in the first day of the week, she guessed from his angry expression that the news wasn't good. What happened? What did he say? Nava asked. Malkijah refused to set anyone free. He's not canceling anyone's death. Nava's strength drained away, along with her hope. She needed to sit down. She stumbled forward and sank onto the top step, ignoring the flow of people coming up for the sacrifice. She listened to the Levites singing the liturgy in the distance. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever, and wanted to scream at them to stop. Why praise a God who didn't answer her prayers? A cruel God who gave her hope and then snatched it away again. Did Malkijah give you a reason why? She finally asked. Dan sat down on the step beside her. He said he can't afford to do it. He wouldn't even meet with us. He sent his manager out to tell us instead. She would confront Malkijah herself, Nava decided as soon as he arrived home from the dung gate this afternoon, or maybe this evening when she waited on him at the table. She would demand to know why he was so greedy and cruel when all the other masters had freed their bondservants. But Nava's courage melted when she realized that he might send her back to his estate if she angered him. Back to Aaron. What about the woman he's betrothed to? Dan said, breaking into her thoughts. Didn't you say she was kind to you? Yes, but what can she do? Let's ask her for help. Maybe she doesn't know what her future husband is up to. Maybe she doesn't even know that her future husband is the only man in the province who won't show compassion. I suppose it's worth a try. But how will we find her? I don't know where she lives. Does she come to the morning sacrifice? We could wait beside a different set of stairs every morning until we see her. I think I remember what she looks like, short and pretty, with dark, wavy hair and a narrow face. Nava nodded. Let's do it. Dan stood and offered his hand to help her to her feet. She couldn't risk hoping again, but it felt good to have a plan, to be taking action. They chose the western stairs first and stood at the top when the sacrifice ended, on opposite sides facing the busy stream of exiting people. Nava scanned hundreds of faces, searching and searching, determined not to give up until... And there she was, walking with an older man and two younger women. As soon as Nava spotted Chana, she forced her way into the crowd, swimming upstream through the powerful current, not caring who she elbowed or shoved aside. Miss, wait, please, she called, not daring to call Chana by name. Chana halted, and the people with her halted too. Nava, is everything all right? No, miss, it isn't. Please, I need your help. Chana hesitated, then said, Go ahead, Abba, I'll catch up with you. She took Nava's arm and then stepped aside to avoid the buffeting crowd. Tell me what's wrong. Nava's words came out in a babbled rush along with her tears. All of the rich leaders took an oath to free their bondservant. I heard them doing it, miss, but Master Malkijah refuses to set us free. Chana's dark brows came together in an angry frown. He refuses? Yes, miss. He told my father and all the other men who have mortgaged their land to him that he won't do it. Other servants are going back to their families, and I want to go back so badly. I miss everyone so much. And Nava saw Dan watching from the other side of the stairs and dropped to her knees. Please, miss, please, can't you talk to our master and ask him to change his mind? Stand up, Nava, Chana said, tugging her arm. You don't need to beg. I'll talk to him. Nava watched Chana rejoin her group and felt a sliver of hope as slender as a thread. All right, guys, that is the end of chapter 29. Liz, how are you doing, my darling? So good to see you. Thank you so much for stopping by in the reading of On This Foundation. We are currently on chapter 30. Right, I'm going to read chapter 30 because I want people to be able to come back in and listen to the reading. So I'm not going to be making the reading go for 2 hours like that now. I'm going to read chapter 30. But how is your day, Lizzie? Hold on there, Lizzie. How have you been, my love? Good to see you, my darling Lizzie. I don't know, do you all celebrate Easter over there? Hope you're having a great day. We're going to read chapter 30, and this is going to be the last chapter for today. Chapter 30, Samaria. We came this close, Tobiah said. We held his thumb and forefinger an inch apart and waved them in Governor Sanballat's ruddy face. This close to an uncontrollable riot breaking out in Jerusalem, the poor against the rich. This close to a work shutdown that would have halted construction on the wall for good. What happened? Sanballat asked. Tobiah shook his head, his arms falling to his sides. The words tasted bitter in his mouth as he spoke them. Nehemiah averted the crisis. He pacified the people. Work on the wall is continuing. I can't believe that man's luck, Sanballat shouted. Tobiah watched as the heavy-set man struggled to stand, leaning on the arms of his shabby throne. The blustering Samaritan disgusted Tobiah, but he needed him as an ally. He needed Gershom too, although he trusted the sinister Arab leader even less than he trusted Sanballat. Geshem rarely sat down during their meetings in Sanballat's private chambers, pacing like a lion restless to pounce, his long robes trailing across the floor behind him. The three men were alone in the room after Tobiah insisted that all the servants be kept away. He knew better than anyone how easy it was to spy on your enemies. How did Nehemiah do it? Sanballat asked, finally managing to rise to his feet. Is the man a sorcerer or a magician that he can mesmerize so many people? How does he get them to blindly follow him? Tobiah gave a short laugh, hating to admit the genius of Nehemiah's strategy. He made himself their Messiah. He fed them with food from his own storehouses and arranged for their freedom. He shamed the wealthy nobles into taking an oath, making them agree to give back the lands that were mortgaged during the drought and to set all their bondservants free. And the nobles agreed to this? That's impossible. I know how greedy some of these local leaders are. There have to be some who refuse to do the governor's bidding. Find the disgruntled ones, Tobiah, and get them on our side. I'm already working on that. My son knows some of the men who didn't take the oath. As soon as I leave here, I'm going to Jerusalem to attend a family event. Nehemiah won't even know I'm there. I'll seek out the disgruntled ones and make them our allies. Guys, you see, as I read this, And it said, I seek out the disgruntled ones and make them our allies. Look at what is happening in the world today. I don't know why somebody sent me this book to read, but I think this book came just in time for me to read. Because look at what is happening in the world today. Did you see the news that happened, I think it was yesterday, where it was made public? It wasn't yesterday, I think it was the day before. Was made public that Russia, China, Brazil, India, and South Africa are joining together against America and Britain and the others. Did you all see that? And because of that, the US dollar lost so much value in the last few days. Well, here it is. Nothing is new under the sun, my friends, because here it is in the book, the good book, where some of the nobles have not agreed with Nehemiah. They have not taken the oath to give back the bond servants and to treat the poor fairly and to give back what they have taken. They have not taken the oath. They are not agreeing. There are some greedy politicians, just like the ones who exist today. But here is this sneaky little one here saying he is going down to Jerusalem to get the ones who are against Nehemiah, to get them on his side. That's how your enemy works. Your enemy will see you or your friend have a one little disagreement, and your enemy tries to come in there, try to get the person who is your friend to be on their side. All because you and your friend have a little disagreement. That's how the enemy operates. Let us continue. He shamed the wealthy nobles into taking an oath, making them agree to give back the lands that were mortgaged during the drought and to set all their bondservants free. And the nobles agreed to that? That's impossible. I know how greedy some of those local leaders are. There have to be some who refuse to do the governor's bidding. Find the disgruntled ones, Tobiah, and get them on our side. I'm already working on that. My son knows some of the men who didn't take the oath. As soon as I leave here, I'm going to Jerusalem to attend a family event. Nehemiah won't even know I'm there. I'll seek out the disgruntled ones and make them our allies. My sources tell me that the peace between rich and poor is very fragile at the moment. He sank onto a cushion and helped himself to a date and raisin cake, to the date and raisin cakes his host had provided. Your plan is good, Tobiah, Gershom admitted, but there has to be more we can do. Nehemiah must be stopped. If we attack this problem on several fronts, we'll have a better chance of a victory on one of them. We'll have to hurry though, Sanballat said. You said you are making progress on the wall? Tobiah nodded. I'll survey it myself when I get there, but my spies tell me that the gaps are being closed. They say the wall has been rebuilt to nearly half its height in some places. Gershom groaned. Andrea, what's up? How are you doing? Once Nehemiah's fortress is complete, he can keep everyone out, including my trade caravans and Sanballat's army. He can keep you out too, Tobiah. We need to fight back before the wall is finished. Listen to me. Sanballat held up his hand as if commanded Gershom to stop pacing and Tobiah to pay attention. We need to attack the workers themselves and make them too terrified to continue. Take them by surprise. Before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we'll kill them and put an end to their work. What? Everyone will be too afraid to continue. Imagine that. There. They will be afraid. I guarantee those cowardly Jews will quit and run home if their lives are threatened. Good, I like that, Tobias said. And we may only have to stage a few attacks if we do a good enough job of spreading rumors and terrorizing people. You hear them? Them are real politicians, you hear them? We'll get all the neighboring Samaritan and Amorite towns to whisper rumors that we are coming for the Jews. Let fear infect them. There's nothing like the dread of an unknown enemy who may attack at any moment to cause panic. The Jews will all quit and go home. My caravans go through the province, Gresham said. They can help sow rumors and warnings under the guise of friendship. I don't think they should be groundless warnings, Sanballat said. I have the means to send armed men right into Jerusalem. If there is even one attack, perhaps a few deaths, then rumors are no longer rumors and the work will halt. Agreed? Tobiah and Gresham spoke at the same time. Agreed. The decision seemed to diffuse much of the tension in the room. Sanballat returned to his seat, and even Gresham relaxed enough to scoop a handful of dates from the bowl. But Tobiah knew that they still faced a formidable opponent in Nehemiah. The man had an uncanny ability to convince the people to follow him. Having several nobles on their side may not be enough. What about Nehemiah? He finally asked, voicing his fear. We need to take him seriously as our enemy. He is not only extremely popular with the people, but he has shown leadership genius. We must destroy him, Gresham said. The vehemence of his reply made the hair on Tobiah's arms stand on end. How? He asked. By every means we can think of, Gresham said. Discredit him in the eyes of the common people. Drive a wedge between him and the nobility, so they'll turn against him. Get King Artaxerxes to see him as a dangerous rebel. Threaten Nehemiah's life, so he's too afraid to continue. He paused. Kill him ourselves if we have to. Tobiah, you know those Jews better than we do, Sanballat said. Is there something in their religious beliefs that we can use to our advantage and accomplish what Gresham suggested? Tobiah sat up straight as an idea began forming in his mind. I think I do know of a way. The Jews believe that God will send another deliverer like Moses one day, a Messiah who will feed the poor and defeat all their enemies. I taunted Nehemiah with this idea when we met with him before. But what if we use the Jewish prophecies to make everyone believe he really is the Messiah? He's already fulfilling some of those expectations, such as helping the poor. Whitney, what's up? How are you doing? We can plant the seeds of this idea in the people's minds, just like we planted the seeds of rebellion. All we need to do is hire a credible prophet. I don't see the point in that at all, Gresham said. Hear me out, Tobiah said, rising to his feet. The promised Messiah is supposedly a king who will restore David's throne. We'll use those prophecies to prey on Nehemiah's pride, and if he accepts the people's pleas for a king, the Persian Empire will destroy him. It shouldn't be hard for a false prophet to help frame Nehemiah as a traitor. I'm told that he hinted at winning freedom from Persia in one of his speeches. But even if Nehemiah doesn't take the bait, the people will be disappointed in him for not freeing them, and they'll turn against him. Want to see how politics run, people? This is how politics goes. One side is saying bad about the other side, and the other side is saying bad about the other side. And who is in the middle? The people. Do you know any prophets you can hire? Sanballat asked. I have a man in mind, possibly a woman too, but they'll expect to be paid. Are we all willing to contribute something to hire them? Tobiah would need the money to hand in hand before he left Samaria. He knew Sanballat's legendary stinginess from experience. Yes, yes, we'll contribute, Sanballat said. It's a good plan, but as I'm still going ahead with the attacks, as Geshem said, we need to fight this war on all fronts. Tobiah hated to be the voice of pessimism, but he didn't want to underestimate their enemy. And if none of these plans work, he asked, Geshem pierced him with his night black eyes. Simple, we lure Nehemiah out of the city and kill him ourselves. All right, that is the end of chapter 30 of the book On This Foundation. I want to say thanks to everybody who has come into the live. Thanks to each and every one of you who have been listening to the reading. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. I want to say thank you for your continued support, my dear travelers. And to the newbies in the channel, I want to say thank you as well for coming in. For the silent listeners who listen in the background but never say a word, I sincerely appreciate you all. Now, I'm going to run off the live and we will see each other again maybe sometime later. All right, guys, that's going to be it from me for today. Until next time, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Talk to you later, guys.